Brett, this is a nightmare. This is much worse than I thought it would be,
Oh
honestly.
yeah.
Like on
uh,
a lot of levels. On the level of visualizing, it's very like I had this moment. Me and Nick like put in a lot of hours practicing this we recorded, and I had this one. I think it was when we took like a pattern like this, which is kind of like a typical thing you see. And then I was like, we are trying to just move it up, and then I was like, oh shit, like this is not stepwise motion in the
right.
scale, right? It's like that first, like we're talking about the major add
Flat three, flat
add
six.
flat three, flat six, right? And so it was like a scale second to a scale third, right? Because you have that E flat in the middle, and then whatever jump to the basically like ninth note in the scale, which is not even completing one octave, and then it's stepwise motion, and here it's a third to a second. So
Right.
even to carry that through, the nine spots was like such a brain fuck. Like it was just so difficult. And okay, so I have a few. I don't want to advance from this scale because I want to dig deeper into it if possible.
Yeah, it is like, yeah, I mean, I think these people need to spend time with this stuff, like more than they probably think, but it comes, you know what I mean?
How nested? Because okay, my original idea was to see this thing nested inside a major scale,
Yep.
but it's sort of the other way. You have to see the major scale nested in this,
Uh,
right?
I don't know if I think about it quite that way. I mean, I'm adding those two notes to the major scale, and then I can just see the whole neck, like,
Now, how are you in transposition? This is the thing that's really like for me, like when I okay, so I put in, I mean, it's been a week since we talked, so not a crazy amount of hours, but hours
yeah.
and hours of actual practice. And for me, practicing in this week looked like the couple of things that I did. It almost felt like the more I worked, the worst I got, because it's like it was like the only thing that was propelling me in the beginning was hubris. Like I'm gonna like it's just like I'm gonna get it. It's gonna be awesome,
Yeah.
And then it was just like a world that I just completely foreign.
Think you
And so
will get it, it just takes time. And then so like transposing like the other keys and stuff, it's like you really need to see this key first, you know what I mean? Like
so you wouldn't move from C major
I
for a
wouldn't
while.
move, no, no.
Okay.
Like I sat in this scale like for quite a while,
What's
when I
quite a
first,
while?
uh I mean, I don't know, probably a few weeks, at least.
Is there a difference in your ability to visualize this key versus other keys? Like, are you much more familiar with, like, let's say
Well, there's
this?
definitely keys more comfortable in than others when it comes to the 9 note scales. I'm still working on this stuff myself,
Of course.
right? And it's like it's I mean it's like a never ending thing, Like I never feel like I know my major scales well enough,
Of
right? And
course. That's the thing.
I'm always harping on my students like major scales, major scales, major scales, you know what I mean? And it's like you can never know those well enough. Then especially when you start adding notes to them, like man, you have to know them. It's like that's the
Yes.
one scale where there's no tricks. There's no tricks to learn it. Like any other scale after that, I can tell you, oh, just raise a note, flat a note, add a note, remove a note, and we can get all kinds of different scales. And you should be able to visualize those other scales in relation to what you already know. You know
Yes.
what I mean?
Okay.
So
So that's so in a sense, that's the basis for you. Like
mhm.
like let me ask you this. For me, okay, so when I was going about applying this, I was trying to work like with some drones. So I
Yeah.
put like a D drone, and I was getting sort of the Dorian sounding thing from the scale, right? Like the second
Yeah.
degree as the root. Does that switch anything in your thinking? Because for me, like the moment that center of gravity flips a little bit, it's very hard for me to like, I just see, the flatted sixth of the scale as the flatted third is the flatted ninth,
Okay,
and the flatted
so
sixth is the flatted fifth.
yeah, it's like, so Alan does minor conversion, right?
So to
So
him, this is a D Dorian scale with a flat
and
nine and
any
a
ma
flat five.
uh probably, yeah, that's probably how he thinks about it, something like that. Now in the book, just for the curious, whoever helped him with that book came up with names for these scales, right? Those aren't like the jazz major add flat 3 flat 6 isn't necessarily Alan's name. Alan has a symbol, right? He just has a symbol for it, and then he just sees it, you know what I mean? But if we look at like, so if we take a step back and we just think about major scales for a minute, any major scale to Alan is Dorian, right? So then if he sees F Lydian, like an F major 7 sharp 11 or whatever, he just thinks D Dorian.
D Dorian.
Boom, he's off. And it doesn't matter.
I am not very different in my thinking. Like that to me just seems to be always seem to be like the logical center of the, just from use, especially playing fusion, you tend to just play on minor and Dorian tonalities most of the time.
Right. Yeah. And then like for, like Pat Martino, like I had always thought I used Pat Martino's minor conversion concept before. And I did that for so long, it's still so ingrained in me that it's, it's not going anywhere. But it's like it's different from Alan's in the fact that Pat plays language, like jazz language, right? He never plays a scale. If you ask Pat to play a scale, he's not going to do it. He's going to play it like a melodic phrase.
Right.
And it's going to have passing tones in it. It might have other scales in it, like harmonic minor or whatever, melodic minor, notes from that scale.
Sure.
Or the flat 5 added to it or whatever, right?
But he just divides it into areas that are
areas,
sort of
right,
based around minor chord.
And then Alan, though, so like Pat Martino, when he thinks D minor 7, right? So he just thinks that chord symbol. And then he'll play D Dorian, D melodic minor. Like those are all part of that same
right. But it's sort of dividing the neck into these, like, I don't know, cowboy chord almost minor tonalities that he can see.
Yeah, it's kind of like
sewed around.
Yes. It's like the cage thing. He's got the 5 positions, and then but with Alan, he's got like a separate symbol for Dorian and a separate symbol for melodic minor. So he has like he doesn't think of them as necessarily together unless he's thinking of like the minor bebop scale, which has the C and a C sharp in it, right?
Right.
So, and then he has a separate symbol for that. You know what I mean? So,
yeah. Okay.
So that's the difference in their thinking. And then Alan's visualization, like the things that he's talked about is like trying to see the neck from the highest note to the lowest note. But then he's also talked about trying to see, 3 or 4 notes of a scale at a time, because, or 4 or 5 notes, whatever. I don't remember the exact quote, but like, he's talking about how you don't usually play a scale, straight all the way up, right? Sure. In a couple octaves or whatever. You're going to play like within 1 octave, probably, of the scale, a phrase, right?
Yeah. So that's sort of like making a 4-part arpeggio or a pentatonic from.
Yeah. And he kind of he talks about seeing things like that sometimes,
Okay. But I guess my question, like, I completely understand when you say and believe that this is where it ends up, like, to where it's just locations on a neck that sort of light up, right? Like, so if you're in C, like you see these half steps here, maybe like I'm assuming that like you're in a place where you see like the chromatic things, and then you've worked out enough of moving structures up the neck to where some of them stuck and they're familiar. But when you write it down, like, you still express it on paper, at least when you wrote like the. By the way, thank you for the supplement, because we were kind of going through the book like, like what are we gonna add to it? You know, it's just, it's like drinking from the fire hydrant. But you were kind of, this is all go together what we talked about. But when you were writing the supplementary material for the lesson last week and what we're still talking about, we were talking, let's say, about one of the common melodic shapes that on one string, which is like minor third half step, and you were describing that as being available from the root, from the seventh. So that kind of talking really takes C as a tonal center. So is there any logic to seeing it starting from that point rather than any of the other 8 points in that scale? Like, I see why you wouldn't see it starting from Locrian, but is that something that like you're intentionally?
I mean, I relate it all to Dorian, right?
So for you, D is the center.
Right, D is
visually?
the center, and then so to me, like the flat 6 is the flat 5 of D.
Okay,
right?
that makes so like it's so easy for me to see like these kind of things. It's natural. I don't know why, but like to see it there, everything relating to C, it just takes up a lot of CPU.
Yeah, for me it was easier to do it that way just because I've been dealing with the minor conversion approach for so long, and Alan uses that minor conversion thing anyway. So
yeah,
you know, I mean, if you're talking about Alan, I mean, the thing is like I don't necessarily think like Alan, right? I've had to take the stuff and put it in something that works for me, which I think is probably similar to what he did. But again, he had symbols, right? He didn't have scale names. Now he knew scale names, right?
Right.
Because there's plenty of videos where he says, you know, harmonic major, and he says, like, you hear him say melodic minor and stuff like that. So he knows those names for those particular scales. Now, how many scales he knows the traditional names for, I don't know. But like, for me, it was like, you know, I don't know, man. Like I've been dealing with myself, like with trying to develop a way to do all of this stuff, right? And for like the Messiaen modes and stuff, I kind of have my own symbol for that, right? So I use like, it'll be like CMM3, and that means C Messiaen mode 3, or I'll use CMM6, and that's Messiaen mode 6. You know, so those are my symbols that I use. And like one of the things I did with Thomas.
Thomas, for reference for the people who see this, is your student who is
Thomas
good.
Dawson. Yeah, Thomas Dawson. Great players, got an album out and all that stuff. Everyone can check it out. And he would come over here and, you know, we'd jam and stuff, right? And one of the things I would do is I'd send him a chart like the week before that he came over that said, like, you know, it would say C jazz major F flat 3 flat 6 in one bar, and then it would say like CMM3 in the next bar, and then B flat whatever in the next bar, and it would just be, that's all he had, right? And then when he came over, we would just start playing, and we're just,
so you're basically you're saying that like the way you navigate form is just scale changes over time, right?
Right.
Over, like through measures. So it'd be like a measure of this scale to a measure of that scale, and then the harmony would, I don't want to say be arbitrary, but like you would improvise it as well from the.
We would improvise it, yes. So it's like you're just improvising with the structures that are in the scale. So there was no pre-planned chord voicings or chord progression. It was just like, let's just do this and see what happens. You know what I mean? And it's like
I completely see that, but like to bring this a little bit, you know, because I think there are a lot of people who are approaching this material who are at the end of the day pretty normal aesthetically. You know what I mean? Like it seems like these scales sort of like they're like sirens. They're like calling for you. It's like, no, like don't use don't use this as your grandfather's harmony. Use the harmony I made you. You know, it's you know, it's tempting. Like I see it, I'm like, oh, and also like, you know, me and Nick were practicing for a few hours. Like it's like we're looking. It's like, is this starting to sound inside? Like what is happening?
Yeah,
Because it's like, you know, we're playing these voicings, you know, with all the delays floating around, and then you hit something better, like ew, you know. But like we're playing like all these major seven, symmetric major 7 sharp 5 things, super wide interval things, like the stuff from your etudes, and yeah, like over a little bit of time, you just stop hearing outside chords and start hearing just voices moving through this thing that sort of makes sense, right? It works out. But bringing it, when you see a chart, when you see like a normal like jazz tune chart, like blue bossa or whatever, just like something that people might know, all the things you are, how quick are you to, like, do you just make the transposition between, like, if it's a sort of Dorian sound, like if you're, let's say you're playing All the Things You Are or Autumn Leaves, something that stays in a key, so that would be like a classic example of where you could use like this scale we're talking about, right? Like for playing, I don't know, like, yeah, Autumn Leaves is a good example in G minor or something. So it would just sort of be like a B flat add. Okay.
Yeah.
And wait a second, would it be that the whole, you would, it's so hard for me to think about this stuff in other keys. So like for the D7, you'd have an F sharp, which you would not have in this, right? There's, oh, no, that's the flat you would have. Okay, so it's like that scale for the whole tune.
Yeah, you could do that for that tune, or there might be like on particular dominant chords, like thinking of like mode 3 for the dominant chords.
How would you apply? Okay, yeah. Let's not
Well,
go there.
mode 3 is going to be a whole nother thing, but like there's, you can play mode 3 off the root, and you get like a of whatever dominant chord, and that will give you the sharp 5 and the sharp 11, and the 9 and the flat 9, right? So I got to think about it. So yeah, sharp 5, sharp 11, sharp 9.
So right. So it's like if it's like over, let's say
So
D7,
get like,
so root, second, sharp, 2, 3. Yeah. Yeah, and then a major 7 as well, right?
Yeah.
Major 7 of the flats. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
You end up with major 7 and a dominant 7.
Okay, so would this be a pretty typical approach for a jazz tune to like sort of the general key, use that, like that jazz add flat 3, add flat 6, and then special preferential treatment for the dominant chords for the cadences?
Probably a good way to start. The good way to start would be to just use the one scale. Right? But like after you've done that, after a while that gets boring, you know. So you want other sounds, you know.
Yeah.
So, and like you said, you know, like nothing sounds outside anymore. Like there, you know, when I listen to Alan, none of it sounds outside to me. It sounds the sounds just move, you know. And it's like he talks about that too. He talks about, I can't remember the exact quote, but like there's a bunch of quotes in the book, but he talks about, you know, having like a chord and finding like 2 or 3 things that come along on top of that, right? So he'll find 2 or 3 different scales that work on one chord, and then he might weave in and out of that. So that's kind of like on Devil Take the Hindmost, that goat lick, right? Called it the goat lick.
Oh my God. Yeah, I'm gonna have a day of reckoning on that one.
That lick, right? It's like mode 3, 4. and mode 7. So that's mode 3. Mode 4, right? That's all mode 4, right? So he's
right.
using, so he's thinking G minor, and then
applying these two scales and kind of bouncing back and forth.
Right, so he's going in and out of these two scales, and the scales give him, like, you know, a dominant 7 altered going back to G minor, right?
Mm-hmm. So that solo is just those two Messiaen modes, or that not that solo, that lick in the solo.
That lick,
yeah.
Yeah.
What's a typical duration of time, like in terms of like beats and measures, that he would stay in one thing?
Well, it depends.
Like how quick can these?
Quick, they can go quick.
Like what's quick? Like a beat?
Like 5 notes. Like
then
5 scale and then 5 notes of another scale. And he talks about that, right? That's what I'm saying when he said, like, the thing is, man, what it comes down to is the movements, right? So he has these movements that he plays. So, I mean, I don't remember this line, but there's a line that I probably be better if I refreshed on this line and then we talk about it. But like,
sure, we'll make a mental note. I mean, some of the fucking fingerings that you're sending me and like I did not expect the movements to be quite as difficult as they are. Like there was one thing with half steps, which was like the going like from the 13th fret of the E string to the 17th fret of the B string to the 20th fret of the G string. I mean, that would require me to hold my instrument differently.
You like you have to hold it like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's fucking crazy. But yeah, those also, I mean, I'm running into like issues of just sustaining, like, you know, like 3 hammer-ons and then like the slides back and forth way up the neck and the G string. Just hard to keep the notes ringing.
Well, his tone is like set up for that, you know.
Yeah.
Tone just has sustain for days, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it was a major discovery for me about his tone, just how dark. Like if you're going to go for that amount of gain with as little fuzz, with as little hair as possible, like to make a smooth sound, like how it's basically all mid range. Like there's nothing in your amp except for gain and mid range, you know, just very, very, and presence just down almost all the way.
He's got like a very, you know, saxophone-ish EQ. So
yeah,
because I played like, you know, that line on the drums were yellow or whatever. He goes, but so I played that on the saxophone, and I learned that line on the saxophone, and I was like, filmed it or whatever, and I was like, yeah, man, that sounds so much like a saxophone, especially the low end. Like, when he does that with his tone, right? I could turn on my clone tone, but
yeah.
See, hang on a second.
Are you running it all digitally?
Yeah.
Plugins.
Let's see. So if I go, right. I don't remember it, but I don't remember all of it. I mean, I've been trying to get rid of all that stuff, right? Until you got a hold of me, I was doing my best to forget all the Holdsworth lines.
No, we are not letting go. We're bringing it back. We're bringing it to the people. You know, I mean, for me, it's just kind of like, it's crazy to talk to you, honestly, because, you know, I never met any, I mean, I don't think there's another one, but, you know, it's like this, I guess that the intense study that this requires without, I haven't come across another thing like this in music, where it's all drawing from a different well.
I mean, that was one of the things that intrigued me so much about it, and what like made me want to figure it out. So like, like we were talking last time about how many scales, right?
Mhm.
So I actually got the proof for my volume 2 book. This
Oh,
is the scales,
oh
right?
shit!
Really like a phone book.
That's all the scales, right?
So this is all the scales. So it's 1,749 scales, right? That's what Alan
Uh-huh.
logged. Then when you get rid of any with more than 4 half steps, it's 1,307. And then when you figure out all the parent scales, it's 217 parent scales. So I have it logged all 3 ways in the book,
Mhm.
right? This book also has like a line compendium. So there are like a few pages of just whole
Yeah.
lines that are categorized by what scale he was using. So these phrases are all one scale for, one scale for the most part phrases, right? So like you can see there, Dorian, 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 right? This is obviously the major scale phrases.
Sure.
And then, so 9-note scale phrases right here, right? F jazz major, add flat 3, flat 6 right there. And then there's
Right.
a dominant one, B jazz minor, right?
So
So
if we go, I'm just curious right now. Like you said, he used, or we're gonna talk eventually about 22, right? 7 of them, let's assume people know, which are like, major, melodic minor, harmonic major, diminished, augmented, whole tone. Now
I
we
have
talked about,
pentatonic and blues scale I have in there too.
oh, pentatonic and blue scale are in there.
Yeah,
Okay, so that's
he
so
uses
we're
those,
yeah, we're at 9, and then 10. Let's call this 10.
The
I
ones that,
cannot I cannot imagine another 12.
yeah,
Like
the
there's
one
a Messiaen.
there's the 7 Messiaen modes are the ones
Okay.
that are what most people are probably missing, right?
Okay.
And that's
What okay, so let's say we have those. What else is left? Like what are the other scales that we
there's all right, so there's the jazz major add flat 3, flat 6, and then there's the dominant version, which is jazz major add flat 3, 7. So it's a dominant bebop scale with an added flat 3, right?
Okay, dominant bebop scale with an added, yes. So like both kinds of 7s and a flat 3.
Yeah,
Would
and then
you think about that one through its Dorian version?
yep,
So for you, it would like if it's in the key of C, it would be like some kind of G minor.
yeah, everything is minor to me. I
Love
can't
it.
get that at this point. I'm too.
I love it. So it's like a minor. It's G Dorian with both 3s and both 6s.
What
No.
is it? So like G minor. What are we doing? So we're doing C7.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's like, I'm sorry. Yeah, so it's got the major third, the dominant third, and it's got the flat 6, right? Added to
Right.
it. Thinking about G
But
minor.
yeah, but it's G minor, so it's very similar. Okay. Yeah, it would be very, yeah, okay. So
And
it's
then
like
there's the
A
minor.
Dorian with a major third is not. If I saw that shape, I would never associate it with that.
Yeah, I mean, this
Yeah,
stuff changes your whole perspective on some of these
yeah.
scales, and like, and then the other scale, the other 9-note scale is the jazz minor add flat 5, 7, right?
Which you would think about in root position, basically,
All
right?
right, that one.
So add flat 5 and 7.
That's the
So,
one that the whole bridge to funnels, the chords all come out of that scale.
oh my God. Okay, so let's say I'm in D. Add, you said one
Flat
more time,
5.
flat 5 and flat 7. But is it what kind of
7. Right?
6?
So you're adding to melodic minor. It's Dorian.
And Okay, so it's like a Dorian with a flattened fifth. And,
right, Dorian with the flat.
yeah. Okay. All right.
Oh, that's
That kind of thing. All right. So if we're minorizing all of them, so the 3 9-note scales, if I'm comparing Dorian, version 1 would have a flat 9 and a flat 5. That would be like the one we've been talking about. Version 2, which is the dominant one, would have a 3 and a flat 6.
6.
And then the last one would have a flat 5 and a major 7th. If I'm just thinking about these as altering Dorian.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
So, but that's it for like the 9-note scales. The other 9-note scale is Messiaen's third mode. There's only 4. You know, there's only 4 that Alan would have been dealing with, because anything after that has too many half steps in a row. Right.
Okay. How about purely chromatic motion? I know in your book you talked about that briefly. I did not get to the, but like you said, that's not something that happens often.
Well, no, he has chromatic movements that he uses, right? So like where he's thinking of the chromatic scale, and he's playing like that kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
So he has that, and then he does do stuff like that kind of thing.
Yeah, just descending shapes.
So it's just
What,
yeah.
that was. What? How are you fingering that? Now, how does that work picking wise? Those kinds of licks where you have like a flattening.
I mean, I'm raking it.
You're raking it backwards?
So I go like pick, finger, and then pick.
Oh! Pick, finger? Where's the finger?
So pick on that note.
And then upstroke?
And then, yeah, an upstroke.
Okay, interesting.
I don't know how Alan did it that way, but that's how I do it.
Oh, so I have to ask you, like, just a little bit about the Alan movements, like the common movements, just in terms of fingering. So, like the first one you wrote down looked something like. So that, like, how are these things picked?
So.
Right. So that is a hammer-on from nowhere?
Yep, right there.
And you're picking kind of the note after it, right? Okay. There are some freaky movements here that, like, you know, really made me especially the ones that are sort of climby. They seem very finger specific. Like there was this one, the second example. Here. Is this how you do it, with your ring to get up?
Yep.
Do that again. So these are the things that fuck me up the most. To do those kind of movements fast, which seem to be constant, right? That's one of the big things that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I wish I had something more insightful to do, but complain about how difficult this is. But I'm still at the place with all this that I'm just like, well, man, it's easier to believe that it's not that this, you know, that it's not quite this complicated.
Yeah, it's not me anymore. So like, so when I first learned, like, the drums were yellow, and I was trying to do a cover of it, um, when I first learned some of these fingerings, you know, watched a bunch of videos, figured out the fingerings and stuff like that. And um, it was really awkward. It was really awkward, right? It's just
Yeah.
not how, a lot of it wasn't natural for me at all. But now I've done it so long, right? Because I did that solo in 2015 or something is when I like learned it and uploaded the cover and all that stuff.
Did you have any of the stuff together, any of the Holdsworth stuff together prior to that?
No, but I've always done like stretchy legato type lines, like pentatonic string skipping, like
Yeah.
that.
That's always been a part of your vocabulary.
Always been doing that since like, you know, since 1990 or something.
Okay.
Something like that. So, and I've done like, I found a picture the other day where I was like 15 and I was doing like this stretch.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what it was, but I was just like, sounds cool.
Yeah.
You know, so I've done stretches my whole life, so that wasn't the problem. The problem was the hammer-ons from nowhere, the fact that there's not a lot of rolls, because like, you know, most guitar players, myself included, when I play legato,
you turn around.
Right? Where Alan might just go. So he'll just hand, then move to ear, then hammer. Like that.
Yeah, and a lot of like the things that are similar to rolls are just sort of like half-step slides. I've seen that there's plenty of that going around.
So yeah, man, it was really awkward, and it took, you know, well, I mean, by the time I had that solo up to speed, then I mean, it was all feeling more natural or whatever. And then I just kept learning and transcribing solos. You know, I didn't ever do any other covers because I didn't want to be the cover guy, and I got a lot of hate for doing that one in the first place. So I was like, it's not even worth it. Fuck it.
Yeah.
Fuck it. I don't want to deal with all the fucking
hate is the currency of the internet. You're lucky. That's how they pay.
I've got like better things to do than deal with a bunch of people like saying a bunch of a bunch of people that can't play saying a bunch of shit, you know what I mean, that they know nothing about. So
yeah.
So I'm just like, all right, whatever. I'm just going to transcribe them. I'll learn them from myself, from my students. And then, you know, the book just started kind of evolving, and I didn't think it was going to be a book. I had like, you know, 5 transcriptions finished, and I was starting to figure out the scale thing and like logging some of the scales and stuff like that. And I got like the Jazz Major F flat 3 flat 6 from the book, just for the curious, right? Mm-hmm. So, man, I think back about how long I've had that book and never looked at that scale.
I remember seeing. I distinctly remember the first time I watched like the instructional video, and he was talking about that Messiaen mode. You know, I don't remember what they called it, but they called it something.
They just called it symmetrical.
Symmetrical, yeah. And I was just, you know, he was saying that, like, you know, he uses it sometimes as a transitional thing, and it was just like, oh yeah, he just goes like this sometimes. I'm not gonna bother with this, you know. But I mean, it's the most, one of the most amazing things is sort of how upfront he was about everything. Just nobody believed him.
Yeah, nobody believed him, including me. Right? You're like, there's got to do it than just that. But like, I mean, the thing is about some of the stuff he says, right? So like, what is a lot? Like, he say doesn't use the jazz scales a lot, but you know, in relation to the major scale, he doesn't.
Right.
That's thinking about the major scale, then he's thinking, okay, I use this one probably the most. Like, really, the most is the major scale, and then probably melodic minor, right? And then then maybe you're getting into like mode 3, right, being the thing after that, and then but the stuff you hear that's really out, that's where it's coming from. You know, it's coming from these 9-note scales. And it's like, it's hard, you know, and plus Alan too, man, I think that he's very pessimistic, you know, and he was very self-deprecating, and like he never gave
Yeah.
himself credit. And it's like, I think too, like me, after going through this process, I feel like I can relate more to how he felt about talking about music, right?
Yeah.
Because once you go through this process and you log all these scales and you start playing through them, and you know, this is stuff like, I mean, I can say all this stuff, blah, 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 all over the internet, and no, people won't believe me. They'll say,
Right.
no, he's not doing that. He's doing more than that. And oh, hey, this guy on
Right.
this said he's using the major scale and he moves random fingers around and blah, random shapes around and stuff like that, right? And it's like, well, all I got to
Just
say
get
is log the scales, you're
right.
safe, right? Transcribe about a good 15 solos all the way through, written
Right.
out, exactly as you can get them with the rhythms and everything. Then start trying to dissect it, right? You got to get the harmony too. You got to figure out the voicings, right? Figure out the voicings, figure out how the scales relate to the voicings. Oh, wait a minute. It's not just random fingerings, because this
Right.
scale actually relates to this chord.
Let's talk for a second about the rhythms, which is for me always like listening to him. That to me, like listening to a guy like Scott Henderson, was always clear to me that Alan's coming from a very different place rhythmically in terms of just subdivision. You
Yeah.
know, with Scott, it's either like floaty blues stuff that's really trying to be rubato, or really locked in, like 16th note double time lines, some sextuplet stuff, occasionally quintuplets and shit like that. But like I see septuplets, groups of 10, groups of 5, just constantly in this kind of music. Like,
Yeah, there's polyrhythmic things going on too, you know.
constantly.
Yeah, with he's very rhythmically advanced, man. I mean, like
Yeah,
very.
and it sounds like a lot of times that's what in a more in the instances where the harmony is a little bit more inside, and he's still playing all this shit. It sounds like a lot of what sells it is the rhythm, right?
Yeah,
It's like those lines as 16th notes or something are not gonna land in the same way.
right. Yeah. Well, that's you know, with the out stuff too. Like when he plays like all the Messiaen stuff, a lot of that stuff is grouped in 6 and 7, you know, and it's like groups of 6, 7, 9, like and it's just, you know, they sound kind of the best that way, you know.
How have you done any conscious practicing on the rhythmic side of these things, other than like getting transcriptions up to speed or something like that, just conceptually?
Yeah, I mean, I played drums too,
Uh-huh.
so uh, you know, playing with the metronome and playing different subdivisions and stuff is something I've done for a long time. So I just apply it to scales. So when I'm playing the scales, you know, I'll practice just playing in groups of 5. Like some of these same movements that I sent
Groups
you,
of 5, or like, the
like
subdivisions of 5?
groups of 5, right? So I'll
Yeah.
do groups of 5, groups of 7, like 5 and 7. Uh, you know, I like those. You know, groups of 6 are just triplets basically, but
Yeah.
um, so I'll take like those same. So the first thing I'll do, what I would have somebody do, is I would have you take those 16th note lines that I sent you, and I'd make them groups of 5 and groups of 7, and I'd practice them along with the Guitar Pro with the click going, right? Because you can have the click going in Guitar Pro and then play those groupings. So that's another step, right, into like this whole thing, is being able to feel the groups of 6 and 7 in the odd
When
group.
you're saying groups, you mean like groupings, or like different subdivisions, like as
I'm
quintuplets?
things, right?
Groupings. Okay. Yeah.
It's not necessarily I mean, if you stay in groups of 5, I mean, you're technically playing polyrhythmic anyway.
Right.
But
The
like,
accents are
but if you're
bouncing around.
switching like Alan does from a group of 6, like he'll be like, you know, 2 groups of 6, then a group of 5 out of nowhere, and then a group of 6, and then a group of 7, and then you know what I mean? It's like, and it's almost like he's I mean, I think it just got to a point where, for him, I believe, where he's just feeling that stuff, right? And he's kind of
Of course.
rushing and dragging, he's kind of rushing and dragging the line based on kind of how he's feeling things, maybe how Gary Husband's pushing him along or whatever, right? So
Uh-huh.
that can affect like what he's going to do,
Yeah.
So it's not, I don't necessarily think it's a super conscious thing, but I do believe that he spent time, you know, investigating rhythm a good deal. So,
Okay.
and
All
it's
right.
like I had somebody say, like I posted transcription on Facebook one day that I had been working on. And it was Alan, and it was a bunch of odd groupings and stuff like that. And he was saying, "Man, there's no way that Alan's conscious of that." You know what I mean? And I'm like, well, most guitar players might not be conscious of that, but tell a drummer that he's not conscious of all the groupings he's doing. If you
Right.
spend enough time watching elite drummers practice drumming or talk about drumming, which you have the luxury of doing these days on YouTube,
Right. That's all they do.
they talk about all that stuff, like stuff that
Right.
just blow your mind. You know,
Hmm.
Henrique, what's that guy? His name, I can't even pronounce his name. Henrique Aldimata or something. I can't remember his name. But he's
Okay.
like great drummer. He's like a teacher at Berkeley, and he's on. There's a video that he does on Drumeo, the channel Drumeo, and he's given a lesson, and he has a click going, and he plays all these subdivisions around it, and he counts it the whole time. And it's like, even with him counting it, you know,
Yeah. Blows
you're
your
just,
mind.
how in the hell, man? I mean, like it's
Yeah.
otherworldly. Like he's
Yeah.
a planet.
Yeah. Okay.
Rhythm is possible to be aware of that stuff, right? But it takes work. That's the thing, is all this stuff takes work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, it's I'm missing. I miss F Dorian. You know, life seemed simpler. We'll advance more. I think Nick's coming back in a few days. We're going to put a few more hours of practicing this stuff, and we won't be ready to advance to the next scale, but we're going to.
all
Well,
right.
we'll get the movements. We'll get them filmed somehow. I don't. Some of them are going to be at embarrassing tempos, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Everybody watching. We're working through it together. And maybe we'll touch on that Messiaen thing next time.
Yeah. And if you need like me to send you a video of me playing these things slow, if that helps you with fingerings and stuff, then just let me know.
Okay. I will let you know. I will try to not bother you with it, but for some of them, for the one that has this, I know I'm going to need some help. It is a long line with that diminished thing, something like that. Then you had like this. I'm
Yeah.
guessing these are hammer-ons from nowhere. They're not raked, right?
Yeah,
You're
not, yeah,
picking the first one,
yeah.
and then it goes straight to legato stuff. Yeah, I'm not looking forward to learning that. Honestly, I'll tell you the truth. I'm gonna have to hang the guitar up and do all that, but it will get done. Um, cool. Thank you for your time.
Right
We'll
on.
see. We'll see you next week, and I can't wait for people to start digging into these.